Nobody likes handcuffs, but especially the golden handcuffs. All right, let's talk about it. This is the real story with Adam and Sherry. I'm Adam Hamalian,
And I'm Sherry Hutchens.
and this is where two broker associates talk about all things real estate. Hey, Sherry.
Hey, Adam, how are you?
I'm doing okay. After all that beautiful sunshine we had last week, it appears winter is coming back. Did the groundhog see itself? I can't remember.
I can't remember. I think he saw himself, and it was 6 more weeks of winter, which what does that mean in California,
Yeah,
right?
him and Ned Ryerson. All right. Um,
Ned Ryerson.
Uh, or is it Ken? There's actually an agent in our market named Ken Ryerson. Ken, sorry for name dropping you.
Yeah,
Anyway,
they're brothers.
yeah, I'm sure the fictional character and the real agent have no relation.
Exactly.
Uh, but I have to admit, every time I see his name on a sign, I think about Groundhog Day because
I
I'm a 12-year-old.
I love that movie. I know it's not one of your favorites, but I've
It's a
watched
little monotonous,
it. It's supposed to be monotonous.
kind of like your partner who tells the same dad jokes over and over again, expecting new laughs.
Yes, but I forget about them, so I laugh when you tell them over.
Well, that's one of the nice things about getting older.
Oh, thanks.
You laughed at that joke yesterday. That's what's great about it.
Exactly.
All right. Not
Okay.
so funny topics. Actually, before we get to the main topic, what's happening with the market in our area?
Well, we are experiencing the post Super Bowl rebound. Is it a rebound? I guess it
Just
is.
bump.
I'm
I don't
mixing my
know.
I'm mixing my sports verbiage, but anyway, you always say that after Super Bowl things pick up, and they certainly seem to have picked up this week.
It is one of those psychological things that I wish I could pin it on something more concrete because I don't really think the Super Bowl has that much to do with it. I think the people that are interested in professional football, especially if your team isn't in it, I don't think it keeps people, I don't understand how it keeps people from shopping, but it just tends to be about this same time of the year.
Yeah. Yeah.
And we've seen a lot of activity both on with our listings and our buyers and agents that we're mentoring their clients. It just seemed like this weekend was the pop of everything starting up for the year.
Yeah, I don't know if it has anything to do with weather. January tends to be cold, whatever our definition of cold is in the San Francisco Bay Area. And then February warms up a little bit. I mean, everything is starting to bloom. I'm looking out my window right now at the most gorgeous tulip magnolia in my neighbor's yard that is in full bloom. And it's like, oh yeah, it's going to get warm. Let's talk about buying a house.
Yeah. Yeah, you talk about California weather. That's the real estate tax is our weather. My adult daughter that lives on the East Coast had the experience of her pipes freezing. And she called me for advice, which is nice that she actually considers my advice. But it was one of those few times I felt like I got nothing for you. I said, I hear people let their faucets drip a little bit at night when it gets really cold because it makes it harder for the water in the pipe to freeze, moving water. So, but I don't really know. You should ask your landlord. It was one of those few times that I felt inadequate as a dad. I didn't have a good answer.
Well, you know everything about houses, but I don't know how you would know about that. We should have asked Kristen Pepin from our Tahoe office
Yeah.
because I bet she would know.
Yeah. When my dad built a place up at Tahoe Donner, it was they drained while they were building it with no insulation. They just they just drained all the water out of the pipes every time they left, just
Oh,
not knowing when they were going back up and if everything froze. But I don't really remember when we were there what he did. But he maybe
mhm.
he did, and I just I was a kid then. I have no idea.
I am just so happy that we don't have to deal with that.
Or snow and yeah.
Forget. Yeah. Oh,
All
I
right, we were
just
talking about taxes, and actually that is our topic today.
yes.
Getting back to the golden handcuffs. No, this isn't anything about the current administration, and no, it's nothing kinky. It is a reality that homeowners who have been in their homes for a long time find themselves into, and that they have all this equity in their home, and they'd like to make a moving change, and the cost of doing that has been difficult. And so Prop 19 addresses one of those issues, which is property tax base. We're not going to touch base on the other one today, but it's really important also, and that's capital gains taxes. So maybe we'll have a tax person on to talk about that one. But today, we're going to be talking specifically about property taxes and a relatively new law that has made people's equity a little bit more portable. Before we get into Prop 19, do you want to talk about Prop 13? Because that's really what set the stage for all this, or what life was like before Prop 13.
13, I'm probably not as well versed on that as I am on Prop 19, but it was at 1970s that
Five.
established a
Yeah.
limit to how high your taxes could go up every year.
That's
2%
right.
was the max,
Yeah.
I think.
So it was, they were fighting this reality that people were essentially being priced out of their longtime family homes because property taxes were going up for retirees. For younger people, it wasn't as big of an issue, but particularly for retirees who had fixed incomes, think the widow, what a widow looked like in 1970, who probably wasn't able to have a career, unlike now, and was living off of a husband's pension or something like that, a deceased husband's pension.
Yeah,
And the property taxes kept going up to the point that they had to leave the home that they had lived in for a generation where they raised their kids. And the only reason was property taxes were getting out of control
yeah,
and escalating, and they had no way to escalate their income to match it.
yeah, yeah.
Come arrive on a scene, then Jarvis and Gann, and they write Prop 13, amongst other lobbying and things that they were doing. And so, yeah, Prop 13 limited the property tax basis to 1%. And then the local municipalities could add on per fees along the way that were attached to that the voters voted on. So things like a park tax or a library assessment or school bond or if it was a new construction Mellaroo. So it's not locked in at 1%. It's one and then a little bit, but it's got to be approved by voters.
Yeah, one and a little. Yep.
Yeah. And so the hope with that is that, you buy a house with a certain budget, and you pay down your loan, and your property tax, while it can go up to 2% a year, the basis that is not the 1%, but say your house was worth 100,000, assessed at 100,000 when you bought it, they could assess it the next year at 102,000.
Mhm.
Or inflation, whichever was less. And when has inflation been less than two? So,
Yeah,
uh,
never.
yeah, with the exception of actually after 2008 in the recession, property values did go down, and that in our local area, the county assessor was doing valuations decreased, in
You had
which
to
case
apply for
people's
that.
yeah, you had to apply for it. It wasn't automatic, but it was happening
Yep,
because that was a reality.
yep, yep, yep. That was a good thing.
So fast forward. So you want to talk about with that what brought the Prop 19 into, like, why then was Prop 19 now 50 years later needed?
Well, Prop 19 is a constitutional amendment that was voted in and became effective in 2021. But let's talk about prior to that, when there were property base transfers allowed in California, but it was voluntary by county. And so you could automatically do it within your county if you sold a house within the same county, sold and bought a house within the same county, you could take your tax basis with you. But if you wanted to move to another county, there were only at last count 6 counties that were participating. And those were generally counties that didn't have enough population and needed people to move there. And apologies to those counties, nobody wanted to move there.
Yep.
I mean, there were places where, you probably couldn't work in your same job and things like that. So, um, there was an attempt to revise that law, and the first time it came onto the ballot, it failed. It did not pass, and then they kind of revised it, and then it did pass, and it was called Proposition 19. And there's a couple different parts of Proposition 19. One is just a simple tax basis transfer when you sell a house and buy a new house. And then there are um, transfers between generations. And so we can talk about those,
So
each of
the general thing here. So say you bought a house in 1985 for 100,000, and in 2025, you sell it for 1 million.
Mhm.
So your property tax was based on that 100,000. Maybe it's creeped up over the years at that 2%. And
But it's still
so
very
you
low.
were paying somewhere probably around $1,500 a year in property tax.
Yeah.
And now you're going to sell the house. It's worth 1 million, not because you made any improvements, but just because inflation or time has passed. So you sell it for 1 million and say you want to buy a comparable house, maybe even the house right next door for $1 million.
Mhm.
Your property tax base would go to 1% of that purchase price, most likely. The assessor still does some work, but basically it's the purchase price, which means that your property tax is now going to be $10,000. So you went from your cost of living being 1,500, or property tax cost going from 1,500 to 10,000,
Yeah.
and that's almost $1,000 a month, about 850 a month. And
Yeah.
if you're on a fixed budget, that's a difficult price increase. So you're kind of stuck. And that's where the expression golden handcuff comes. You might have $1 million house, but you're stuck in that house because you can't sell and buy a new house, regardless of the cost of moving, even the
Mhm.
identical house right next door, because it's going to cost too much to do that.
Yeah, that's going to add $1,000 a month to your expenses, approximately. And for someone who is probably retirement age or older, because it's got to be, because if you've been in the house for that long, you're probably that age. That's just an expense that most people are not willing to take on.
So what? Well, so then who qualifies for being able to do this tax-based exchange?
So if you want to take your tax basis with you, there are a couple of requirements. You can be 55 plus and do it that way. It is also eligible. You're also eligible if you are a disabled veteran or if you are a victim of a wildfire. All three of those categories can take transfer their tax basis transfer. But I'm going to just say take their tax base with them.
Yeah.
And you just apply for it through the Board of Equalization, and there are some rules around exactly how you do it. But let's say you sell for 1 million and you buy for 1 million, then the transfer is just from one to the next. If you sell for 700,000 and you buy for 1 million, the first 700 is transferred from your tax base, and the other 300,000 is a differential reassessment, is what it's called. So that's at the regular tax base. Um,
So that's
and
also a change, right? Because previously, prior to Prop 19, even in those few counties, you had to buy at equal or less value, right?
that is correct, equal or less. And you could only do it once
Under the
um,
old law.
under the old law. Now you can do it up to three times. And this is the best part, all 58 counties have to participate.
That's interesting. I think one of the ways that they got that law to pass is that the state, there's some reimbursement from the state to some counties for people that are utilizing this, so that,
I didn't know that.
yeah, so for counties that have less revenue, and the idea that a market value house there somebody is bringing in their low tax basis, the county is losing out on money. So
Yeah.
I don't remember how much is being compensated by the state, but there is some aspect of it there that's helping and I forget what the requirements are. It's all, all one of those kind of sausage making bills.
Yeah, I don't know. I
Uh,
didn't know about that, but yeah,
yeah,
that would make sense though.
yeah. So, mechanically, how does what's the timing of the process? Do you have to sell before buying? Do you
Mhm.
have to identify? Is it like a 1031 exchange where you've got to identify the next property before you sell the first one? Walk us through that scenario.
It's really easy. We just had a client who moved from somewhere else in the state and moved down here to be closer to kids and moved into a retirement community. And so she brought her tax base from Sacramento County down here. And it was a sell first, and then buy next transaction. And so that was fairly straightforward. Instead, she could have come down here, identified a property, and bought first, and then gone back to Sacramento and sold after she had purchased the first one. That also works. There's a 2-year time limit for this one, and I'm making a point of that because the generational one is a 1-year time limit, and we'll talk about that later. But you have 2 years in which to fill out the paperwork and submit it to the Board of Equalization, and it can be in either order, as I said. So
So the State Board of Equalization, I thought that they needed to file paperwork with the local county assessor.
I think you file it with the county assessor, but the Board of Equalization oversees this.
Okay. All
Yeah.
right.
Yeah.
And so they don't have to buy first. Or they don't have to sell for whatever works for anybody's individual
Yeah.
situation.
Yep.
And
Buy
then with
first,
it,
sell second. Buy sell first, buy second. They don't have to identify the property. It's just a matter of completing the paperwork, getting the final closing statements for each property and submitting them for transfer. And it takes a really long time for the county to process the paperwork.
yeah, well, we're hoping to have a candidate for the Contra Costa County Assessor's Office on later this year. And so we can ask him that question about why does that take so long? Maybe
Yeah.
that'll be part of his stump speech. Um, the Because Rossmore is a significant market in our area for retirees, and the ownerships there are blend between condos and co-ops. And co-op, you don't actually own a parcel number. You own a stock certificate. Does it work for co-ops as well
It,
as a traditional condo or a single family home?
it does. It absolutely works for co-ops. Yeah. Our client had purchased a co-op. So that
All
was one
right.
of the questions that we had to reach out and ask for on her behalf. So
Little things that we don't know.
the little things that pop up. This is a very complicated proposition or law. I guess it's a law now, and it's very situational. There are lots of different exceptions, which I'm not really qualified to discuss here, but someone who is familiar with tax law could answer, especially when you get into generational transfers.
What, you're not a CPA or a tax expert? Tell me more about that. Because
Just
I
barely
thought
sell
every
houses.
realtor was an expert on everything.
No, we think we're an expert on everything.
We should start a podcast and talk about real estate like we know what we're doing.
Oh yeah, good idea.
All right. Okay. So, um, you referenced maybe that there was some other aspects to it, like inheritance and generational transfers.
Yeah.
What can you tell us about that?
So, if a parent wants to gift or sell their home to a child, they can transfer the tax base to the child as well. The property that they are transferring has to have been their primary residence, and the child has to make the home a primary residence as well. Now, grandparents can also do this from grandparent to grandchild, but there's an odd exception to this, and that is that the parent has to be deceased. A
Mm.
grandparent can't bypass a parent and go directly to a grandchild. The parent has got to be deceased in order for that to work. And there is a time limit on that of a year to apply for that tax-based transfer. It
And in
is,
that
yeah,
case, whether it's the child or the grandchild has to move into the house.
they've got to move into that house. Yeah.
And I think that's true also when the owner passes away and it goes through a will or a probate or a trust,
Mhm.
that if they can apply to have the property tax bases stay the same, but they have to move into it as their primary residence.
Got to be their primary residence, and it's got to be done within a year. They've got to apply for the homeowner's exemption if, and the home has to have had a previous homeowner's exemption. And sometimes there's a complication in that the trust says, I want my assets to be divided evenly between 3 children or
So,
three. And so one of them has to move into that house.
yeah.
And so it's interesting because one of them can move in, make it their primary residence, and then they can move out and a different child can move in and make it their primary residence. There can't be any gaps in there. There can't be any rental, situations, but that can rotate between the 3 kids. I'm calling them the three heirs.
Yeah.
And sometimes there's another situation where you've got the assets to be divided between multiple children, and one child wants to buy out the others. And Proposition 19 has an exception where they can get what's called a bridge loan on the house so that the other two, or however many other kids there are, can be bought out, and the tax basis still stays the same, because when you get a loan, it generally triggers a reassessment of taxes. So
Yeah.
it's a very complicated law, but it's well thought out, I think, in my
Yeah.
opinion. I know there are people who are not fans of it. But yeah, that's how that works.
So recently, and I think the deadline has passed a week or so ago, there both you and our admin encountered people trying to get a proposition, I think, on the ballot when you were they had a petition trying to save Prop 13, and I think it was specifically about this part of Prop 19 because
Yeah.
the limitation of the parent to child or grandchild is more strict under Prop 19 than it was under Prop 13. There was more leeway previously,
Mhm.
and that it's a little bit harder to do now. And so they were trying to advocate for protecting Prop 13 like it was going to wipe away all of these benefits.
Yeah.
And that's interesting. I haven't read the proposal, and all, these policies are really above my pay grade. We're really looking at it more from our client's perspective rather than the broader policy. But there are some definite things about this that I think are good for our market in general. Digging down to specifics is different
Mhm.
because it's freeing up housing. So I'll use the example of my mom who lived in my childhood home until just the last couple of years, but when she moved to assisted living, but she couldn't move from her four-bedroom house to a two-bedroom house or a condo. Um, well, she could have, but if she did, her property tax, even if she was downsizing, was going to handcuff her. So she had to stay in it. But the other part about that, which I'm going to mention now, but we're not really talking about, is the capital gains that she would have sold and had to pay a lot in capital gains. But it's keeping single people or empty nesters in larger houses that they may not want. And because
Or-
now there's more freedom for them to move, whether it's within the same market or to a different part of the state for whatever reasons, it's freeing up these what has been a family home, and we've got to be very careful about fair housing laws. Anybody of any makeup,
Mhm.
singles, couples, they can live wherever they want. They can buy the house.
Yeah.
Um, the but the kind of the reality that people groups that are gathered in more than four like bigger houses, you can use whatever word you want for that.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, sorry, I didn't mean to be swarmy about that, other than sometimes the word police makes it difficult when they change our language and there's not replacement language that makes it easy.
Right. Exactly.
Um, and so that in theory could loosen up the housing market as people can move on from their current house to something else that's better size for them.
Yeah. Yeah. You want to go back to the guy at Whole Foods that I encountered who was trying to get me to sign the petition to save Prop 13. And I believe it was like to get rid of Prop 19. And so, of course, I had to stop and I started to quiz him about exactly what it meant. And I could see him getting irritated with me because he's like, just sign it, lady. I have no idea. They just hired me to get signatures. And I was like, never mind, I'll do some research on this. And didn't get any answers from him. And I moved on and have not actually since. You know how I have questions. I always have questions.
That poor guy, he has no, like, if there's a few handful of standard things in our partnership, and Sherry saying, wait a minute, I have questions, is like right near the top of the list. Part of the reason why she's as good as she is at pretty much anything she puts her hand to is
Well,
because she is always a learner and she's curious, and she does not accept the whatever, simple answer that's being given without the understanding of context. She's like, sec. I have
Yeah.
questions.
Yeah,
And
that poor guy at Whole Foods with the clipboard.
he was just hired to be a canvasser. Just collect as many signatures as you can. He had
That's
no
right.
idea.
And ignore this woman who wants to ask questions.
Yeah, exactly.
Um, Exactly. So, anyway, I lost my train of thought. Oh, the other thing I was going to talk about was the people online who are complaining about the boomers are staying in their houses. Two people living in a four-bedroom house and they're, selfish and they should sell their house and give it to us. We have a housing shortage. There's a reason the boomers are staying in their houses. They oftentimes, probably don't have enough money to retire and all of their the bulk of their retirement income is or not income. The bulk of their retirement assets are at that house, but they can't afford to sell it because until recently they couldn't do a tax-based transfer, but also capital gains taxes, which we need to
Yeah.
talk about in another podcast. But when you've only got a $250,000 exemption for a single person, $500,000 for a uh,
Individ.
for a couple,
Yeah.
um, that doesn't go very far in California. If you're sitting on a $1.5 million house, I know that sounds like a lot of money to people in the rest of the country, but our cost of living is different out here. That is just an average price house in Walnut Creek, California, where we're sitting right now. And if you can't, sometimes you can't afford to sell it.
Yeah.
So
Well, and I just want to be clear, I was not implying that people should feel obligated to move. I was only saying if somebody wanted to move. Because even
yeah,
if that boomer couple was taking up a 4 or 5 bedroom house, it's their right. They bought it. They should get to live where they want. I was
absolutely.
only suggesting that if somebody wanted to downsize, not take care of a big house, not have a lawn,
Oh,
maybe
I think a
move
lot
to
of
be
them want
closer to family or some other attraction.
I agree, but that's where we come back to your term golden handcuffs.
Yeah.
Maybe it's a two-story house. They can't even walk upstairs anymore,
Yeah.
so
Um,
it's complicated.
just in passing, as we kind of come to the close here, just this last week there was a bill passed in the House in Congress, which is kind of an amazing thing because it passed something like 320 to 8, widely bipartisan bill um, that has to do with housing, and it's got some stupid name like Housing for the 21st Century. And and so I was kind of curious about it, and as I'm trying to figure out what it actually did, because the goal is to increase inventory, really with the underlying goal of increasing affordability, since that's the hot word of the day. And so at first I was kind of excited about it, and then all I could find out about it is that it sets up um, some guidelines that there should be some more studies being done about housing problems. I'm like, that's all it does. There's no streamlining mortgage or not mortgage building permit process to allow more building, limitation of regulations so that more housing can happen, incentives for infill projects. One of the things that California is doing is limiting the restrictions on ADUs, which aren't single family homes, but can provide a relief valve if you're a single person and want to live closer to your employment center. It's a way to live a little bit closer in and minimize your commute while you're sorting your life out, or maybe it's a long-term thing. Who knows? Um, so we'll see. At first glance, anything that the Republicans and the Democrats can agree on that much probably is a helpful thing for the American people. Um, but it kind of felt a little bit like we're going to study something, which feels a whole lot like spending money.
I think what they're going to do is defer it to the next administration. We've got a governor who is terming out, and we've got people who are stepping forward and saying that they're going to run for governor. And what I'm hearing on the preliminary commercials on TV is that housing is going to be a big deal. We've got a housing problem
Yeah.
in California. For all those people who say that people are leaving California in droves, we're not seeing that happen. We
No.
see occasionally somebody move to live to be closer to grandkids or because they need some care and somebody's going to take care of them in another state. But as a rule, we do not see people leaving in droves here. So
No, not in the Bay Area.
no, not at all. So Uh,
Because we got great weather where our pipes don't freeze.
exactly. And I'm looking at a gorgeous tulip magnolia out my window, and in about a month, we're going to plant tomatoes.
Yeah. All
I
right.
wanted
Any
to mention a website where people can go to look at information about Prop 19, boe.ca.gov. And in the search bar, type in Prop 19, and it'll bring up all kinds of frequent FAQs about it. And there's also a comparison sheet of what it used to look like when it was Prop 60 and what it looks like now that it's Prop 19, and how you might fit into one of those scenarios and be eligible for a tax-based transfer.
All right. That sounds great. Thank you, Sherry. You've been really educational today. I loved being the interviewer.
Thanks.
I was not on the spot for anything.
I'm a big fan of Prop 19. I think it is a good thing. And so
I do
whenever I
too.
can talk about it to a client, I'm happy to do so.
Yeah. If that was one of the reasons why you had not considered moving, please call us. Let us help you explain the details of how it might work for you specifically. Obviously, go to the website that Sherry just gave to do your own research.
We'll put in the
And
show notes.
yeah, and all that'll be in the notes. So, any past thoughts or last thoughts before we sign off?
No, I think we covered it.
All right. If you like this podcast, be sure to like and subscribe. And if you are an agent, think about checking out our other podcast, The Real Story with Adam and Sherry Coaching Edition. It's geared right now for new agents, but we are covering a lot of material. Even if you're a seasoned agent, you might find it to be helpful.
Yeah.
Dorothy was right. There's no place like home. Bye now.